Welcome into a Wednesday, October 9th edition of Daily Faceoff Live, streaming live on the DFO YouTube. I'm Tyler Yaremchuk, and that is not Frank Saravalli. That is the man making his second show of the day for you, and it's only noon.
It is great to be back with you. I will tell you this. I caught part of the show yesterday, but I didn't catch the new music, so I like it. You're really up in our style this year here on DFO Live.
Yeah, we got some rolling along. We also have a fresh new title sponsor of the show. We are brought to you by Fountain Tire. You and your family safety is important. Fountain Tire specializes in tire and auto service, and you don't have to settle for a good deal or good customer service, because at Fountain Tire, they do both. They treat your vehicle like it's their vehicle, and right now, they want to save you some money. Fountain Tire is a great deal going on. You can save up to 25% off select tires, including Goodyear, until October 10th. You only got one more day to take advantage of this thing. Plus, you can save an extra $50 on any service of $150 or more. Some restrictions apply. Head to fountaintire.com to find out more info. Colby, last night was opening night in the NHL with a triple header, and we got a handful of things to hit on. But first, there was news off the ice this morning that is making some waves and some headlines. It's payday around the NHL. We'll talk about Verhaeghe. We're going to talk about the Joey Daccord extension, which was announced earlier today as well. But let's start with Linus Ullmark out in Ottawa. There were kind of, the rumblings and the rumors that as soon as he was traded there, he was open to signing an extension with the Senators, which I found, a little bit surprising considering where Ullmark is at in his career and where the Senators have been the last number of years. But he gets the same AAV as his good buddy, Jeremy Swayman, a hair less on the years with a 4-year deal. But what do you make of Ottawa locking up Ullmark before he's even appeared in a regular season game with them?
Look, I think it's a good decision because I think it brings stability to a place that has had anything but over the last number of years, Tyler. And, one thing that I can be honest that I didn't quite realize is that, what you're buying here with Linus Ullmark is you're buying a guy who has not just played well last year or the year before. We know about the Vezina Trophy season, but you could even go back to his last 2 years in Buffalo where he had a .917 and a .915 on teams that, weren't protecting him. They were sloppy defensively, and there were many issues for those Sabres teams. So you're looking at a guy who's got like a career .920 goals against, who's won Vezinas, who's played in the playoffs, who's had 3 incredible years, but really going back almost 5 years now of really, really competent goaltending. But I like the deal. I think it's not too many years. I like the term. I think the number is probably higher because the term is a little bit shorter. I probably, if he was looking for a longer term deal, my number probably would have been in the 7s. But again, I think this is a win for both teams, and it brings stability, and the cap will continue to go up. So the percentage will continue to go down. I really like it. It signifies to other players like, hey, I think we're starting to really move upwards in Ottawa.
Yeah, and it also goes back to what Jeremy Swayman was saying over the summer about wanting to reset the market a little bit for goalies. And again, this seems like a pretty simple negotiation here. Ullmark's a little bit older. He's a similar quality goalie, obviously, to Swayman. They were a tandem in Boston for a couple of years. But yeah, I do think it's a really smart deal for both sides, because if you're Ottawa, you also want to be sending the message to your fans, to the rest of, the players on that team that, hey, we're going to contend. We're not going to cheap out here. We got an opportunity to bring in an elite goaltender, and we're going to keep them around. I do know we're battling through a little bit of an audio issue right now, so we're going to continue humming along while we work on that behind the scenes. But what do you think about Ullmark moving away from Boston in general, Colby? Like, I think there is a pretty general sense that, hey, Ottawa's got their elite goalie. It's going to be a big reason why they take a big step forward this year. But also Ullmark being out of that Bruins system into an Ottawa team that was not good defensively the last number of seasons. Do you think he can keep up an elite level of play?
Yeah, look, I'm always a little hesitant to throw the E word around. Although he has had at least one season that I would consider to be elite, that 46-1 Vezina Trophy season. I think everybody remembers that. But I look at the Buffalo Sabres and the years that he had there, where he, was 17-14. He's 10-6. He's got a 9.17. He's got a 9.15. Like, I think if Ottawa gets 9.17 to 9.25 goaltending out of him, I think they'd be really, really happy, Tyler. And again, you look at this back end for for the Ottawa Senators, it leaves you with question marks, wanting a little bit more. So I think they're going to have to be a team that manages the puck really well. I think the excitement in the Ottawa lineup is probably down the middle with Stützle, Norris, and Pinto. And then obviously Adam Gaudette you can throw in there as well. So I do think that there's reasons to feel, okay, we've got the right players, at least at the front. All right, our defensive group is a work in progress. I do like Sanderson. I think puck management is going to be so important in Ottawa to make sure you're not leaving Linus Ullmark out to dry. But I go to those Buffalo years, look up his numbers. They're really not bad considering how bad Buffalo was defensively.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move along to what did happen on the ice last night. And let's start out in Utah, where our guy Frank Saravalli was on the scene for the first game in franchise history for Utah. Of course, if you're wondering, hey, why is everyone saying first franchise game? Didn't they move from Arizona? As a part of the process, the NHL deemed this is a new franchise that has nothing to do, in air quotes, with the old one in Arizona. But just a couple of minutes into that game, Colby, it was Dylan Guenther scoring what is technically the first goal in franchise history. Let's take a listen.
Ring carries it across, drops one, shot, score! Dylan Guenther lights the lamp! Utah on the board first, and it ends up on the stick of Dylan Guenther. Look at Dylan.
Colby, it's Dylan Guenther, the guy they extended just a couple of weeks ago with that big long-term deal. But getting a look at kind of the sights and sounds out in Utah, what did you make of the first game at the Delta Center?
It looked great. It really did. It looked electric. It sounded loud. The team came out on fire. They really played the first period like their hair was actually on fire. I think, look, this is an exciting young team that has two top lines. We talked about this a little bit with Frank on Morning Cup of Hockey this morning. I'm not exactly sure. I think this is a playoff team, as my co-host Johnny Lazarus has bet me that the Utah Hockey Club would be a playoff team this year. But from everything you saw, ownership, front and center, Frank said $900 million into the arena over the next 3 years. That's going to make it one of the biggest venues in the National Hockey League, right? So I think they're hitting all the right notes. You had an absentee ownership group that was only in the news for the wrong reasons in Arizona. Now you come here, you've got this. I like what they're doing. I like how they're hitting all the right notes. And look, I think people are really excited in Utah about this hockey team.
Yeah, and I do like a bunch of stuff that they're doing. One, off the ice, like you said, there's a high level of commitment here, but also just in the way they're building this hockey team. I'm very high on Dylan Guenther. This is a guy only 21 years old, put up 35 points in 45 games last year. I love that they just go, you know what? We're not messing around. Lock him up. Keep him as a member of this hockey club for the entire prime of his career and build around guys like him and Keller and Krause and all those other pieces. Love what they did on the blue line this offseason. Like, this is a good team. And I do think a little bit of the, they're going to be a playoff team projections have gotten a hair out of hand. It seems like some people are talking like they're a lock to make the postseason. I do not think that is the case at all. But the point is, the future is bright in Utah. Let's talk again about a big game last night. One of the big ones in that triple header. It was banner night in Florida. About 36 hours after the players got their Stanley Cup rings, they got to watch their Stanley Cup banner float to the rafters down in Sunrise, Florida. Colby, obviously always an emotional night when you get stuff like this. And then the Panthers go out and, man, they deliver for the home fans as well. That game, I know it eventually got a little bit close, but it was looking out of hand very early on.
It wasn't ever really that close other than on the scoreboard. I think the Florida Panthers came in and they bullied the Boston Bruins. They made their D-core look slow. They beat them back to the net. They were better in the most dangerous high traffic area of the ice. That was a Florida Panthers hockey win. And look, this team, they're not as deep on the back end. They did lose some pieces in this offseason. Sergei Bobrovsky, I thought he was just okay in that hockey game last night. But again, they scored ugly goals. Their special teams came through. They fed off the energy of the building. I think people have high expectations. Hockey in South Florida seems to be in a really, really good place right now. But the one really interesting thing, and I think it's something that we're going to talk about all year. And I know you guys talked about this on the show yesterday with Frank when you said to him, "What are you expecting out of Florida?" He looked right at the back end and he said, "I just don't think they have enough on the back end this year." We felt like that last year because they went into last season with massive injuries on their back end. And we said, you know what? I'm not sure they're going to be in a good enough place come October or come American Thanksgiving to really be a threat in the spring. Well, they proved us wrong last year. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm not going to count this Daccord out, although it is only one game into the season.
They're also facing a bit of a problem. And this is going to tie into Carter Verhaeghe as well. And I touched on it yesterday. Every Stanley Cup champion, it feels like, goes through this, but the guys who contributed as value or unexpected parts of your run to a Stanley Cup, all of a sudden you got to make the choice if you're going to pay them or not, right? And Gustav Forsling is now no longer, that much of a value piece. He's got his extension kicking in. You can look now to the forward group. Evan Rodriguez makes $3 million. Sam Reinhart's up to 8.6. And now Carter Verhaeghe is going to have a new deal that kicks in next season. They announced an extension with him last night. It's a $7 million AAV. It is an 8-year deal. He becomes the 7th player in the league signed through the 32-33 season. Back-to-back 30-goal campaigns, back-to-back 70-point seasons for Verhaeghe. Do you think he's a $7 million player, though?
Yes, I do. And we talked about this morning on Morning Cup of Hockey. You look at his goal production, okay? You are buying on a down year, 25 goals, on a great year, 35 goals, maybe 40 goals, right? And so you look at a guy who performs in the playoffs in your biggest moments. He's got 7-game winners last year. You look throughout his stats. He's always been a clutch player. And, you think about the number 7. Well, 7 this year is not as much as 7 next year and the year after. So I look at that and say, you're getting at worst 25 goals for $7 million. But let's talk percentage, right? 5% of your cap, 4% of your cap for 25 to 40 goals, guaranteed, good or bad year. I like the deal. I think it's a good one. I see a lot of people that don't think it's a good deal. They think this team will be regretting it. I'm not one of those guys.
Also, Frank had a great tweet just about Carter Verhaeghe's path to this point in his NHL career. I mean, this is a guy drafted by the Toronto Maple Leafs. He bounced around organization after organization after organization, Colby. And it's a great story. Again, Frank's tweet, drafted by the Leafs, traded to the Islanders, got cut twice from AHL Bridgeport, was sent to the ECHL in Missouri, eventually cracks the lineup with the Bolts, wins the Stanley Cup, but then doesn't get qualified by Tampa, lands with Florida, and now he lands a $56 million extension. It is a really, really cool story of how he's gotten to this point. If I can be critical of it, and I know the cap's going to go up a lot, this deal doesn't kick in until he's 30. They are at some point going to be paying 38-year-old Carter Verhaeghe $7 million. And I just think in his mid to late 30s, I don't know how well this is going to age, but I also don't sit here and fault the Florida Panthers for being like, no, we have to keep this guy around. Let's move on to the team the Florida Panthers beat in the Stanley Cup final last year. And Connor McDavid doesn't want to hear any of that, Colby. Yesterday at his media scrum, he shot it down. He said, enough about last year. The Oilers have their sights set on this season, and they open things up tonight. They'll raise their Western Conference champion banner to the rafters at Rogers Place. But what are your expectations for the Oilers in the regular season this year? Because I think it is a bit of an interesting situation for them because they're ultimately not going to be judged about what happens in these next 82 games here, but they still need to be focused because as they learned last year, things can get out of hand in a hurry no matter what your expectations are.
Yeah, I'm not ready to sit here and say the regular season doesn't matter for the Edmonton Oilers. And I'm not suggesting that's what you're saying either, but that is a narrative right now surrounding this team. Now, I said that about the Tampa Bay Lightning for the last number of years because you know what? They won back-to-back cups and they made their runs to multiple more that they didn't win or they had deep runs. The Edmonton Oilers have not been making deep runs for the last 5 years. They've been struggling to get into the playoffs and then continue to do what they've done during the regular season. So I think the regular season is important. I think there's still roster battles that are going to take place on the back end for the Edmonton Oilers. I think Stuart Skinner, while he definitely proved himself last year during the Stanley Cup playoffs, I think he needs to continue to show us that he's a guy who could take this team to a Stanley Cup. And then again, you've got the new additions. You've got guys who now are raising their hand and they want to go play in Edmonton. Was talking to a friend of mine the other day who's unsigned, who's considering retiring. And we were talking, well, maybe LA is an option. Maybe this is an option. And he's like, those don't interest me. Honestly, I think if the Oilers reached out, we'd pack our bags and we'd go. So there's a whole new aura about this Edmonton Oilers franchise that guys are all in on. So I think the regular season matters. I think you're going to see Connor McDavid on national television in the United States more. I think there's people that got woken up to the brilliant player that he is. I loved the commercial that ESPN was running all day yesterday. It's the first time they're marketing in many years. I'm like, wow, this is really good. So I think this team has certain things to work on and figure out through the regular season, but it is Stanley Cup or bust. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, 100%. I think part of it is, you don't want to get high on your own supply or get your head filled up too much with the whole regular season. Doesn't matter. We're Stanley Cup contenders, will be judged on the playoffs. For the Oilers, there are advantages to having a good regular season. And Brian says in our chat, the Oilers want home ice advantage. And I think absolutely they should be looking to win the division. They should be looking to win the conference. They should be, quite frankly, looking to win the President's Trophy so that no matter how far they go, they get the first games and the last games of any series on home ice. But a lot of people projecting the Oilers or picking the Oilers as their Cup favorites. They open as the odds-on favorites from our friends at Bet365. Let's get into a little bit of goalie talk. What a perfect day to be doing the blue paint with Carter Hutton. Excited to welcome former NHLer Carter Hutton into the show, back to do his bi-weekly hits on DFO Live. Also, starting goalies with Carter Hutton made its return yesterday, and Hutz, you had a clean sweep on the betting front.
So got it. You know what I mean? I thought I might be a bit rusty, but I took the sure thing there, the over without Swayman starting and the Panthers at home with the banner raising. So it's been a good start, and what a day for goalies. Exciting times.
Yeah, before we talk about the extensions that have happened and even one that hasn't happened, let's take a step back a little bit. You were on the over last night because it was Korpisalo, not Swayman, starting for the Boston Bruins. And I'm sure the Boston Bruins, Cam Neely and company, were sitting there after the fourth and fifth goals going on Korpisalo going, okay, it's a good thing we got Jeremy Swayman locked up. The deal already looks good, right?
Yeah, especially last night. I love the crowd chanting, "We want Swayman" last night down in Florida. So that was good. And, for me, from the other side of it, I've played in regular season games early in the year. It's just a little sloppier. There's more offense. So it's always trickier for a goalie. So when I see a line at 5.5, and especially without a number one starting, that's something that kind of lights up the over in my eyes.
Well, let's talk Linus Ullmark. We're talking Jeremy Swayman. These guys are goalie partners. We know about the big famous hug, something everybody absolutely loved to see. Look, he cashed in today. And, I look at that contract and I'm like, this makes a lot of sense. He didn't get 8 years. He got 4. Okay. But he got a nice AAV to put him up there with the elite goaltenders in the National Hockey League. What do you think about this deal? Do you think in a new system, in a new structure, not having that Boston Bruins way, is he still poised to have that type of success?
Honestly, Cobes, I think he does too. I played with him directly for 3 years in Buffalo, and this was a team where we weren't very good defensively, and Linus was a difference maker every night. I remember a few times I would go in stretches of games where I was hanging on by a thread, how hard I had to compete to try to keep our team in games, where for Linus, it just seemed like this was water off a duck's back. He's the guy that has the mental capacity to manage it, even if there are games where Ottawa's not going to be great defensively. For me going into this trade, I always thought it's going to be a comfort for him. He's a guy that's been very open about how his family comes first and how he wants to be somewhere. He's got 247 games played now in the National League, and he's got a .919 save percentage. Those are absurd numbers when you look over that stretch. I know a lot of people would be like, he's protected in Boston, but he had numerous years in Buffalo where he put up great numbers and he wasn't protected. So I think this is a great deal. Low risk in the sense of 4 years, but at the same time, I think Ottawa gets their guy for the future here.
Yeah, I agree. Totally low risk with the term. And I said that I thought if he wanted more money, or more years, he probably would have had to taken less money. I also wrote his numbers down from Buffalo. He had a 915 and a 917 his last years in Buffalo. Like, that's pretty good numbers for a team that didn't defend all that well. Let's move to Joey Daccord. He gets an extension today. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm super familiar with his game. I obviously know who he is. I've seen him play, but he hasn't played, 60 games total? He started in the NHL, something around that. It's a pretty nice contract for a guy with that little amount of experience.
I think this just goes to show you what he did in the minors as well, right? He had a cup run where from the Calder Cup, he brought them to game 7. He was a workhorse. He played 26 games straight for them during that playoff run. And last year, carrying the load, playing 50 games for when Grubauer struggled, right? And I think that's something we've kind of found with Grubauer. He's injured. He struggled. He hasn't really found his identity totally in Seattle, other than the little playoff run where they knocked off the Avs. Since then, it's been a bit of a whirlwind for Grubauer. So I think locking Daccord up, but I also feel like the way the cap is going up and the way things are going, and Joey Daccord's progression into a pro goalie, into an NHL everyday guy, I think this is a pretty good value buy. He looks undersized. He just plays a little bit smaller than he is. He's a bigger guy. His dad, Brian Daccord's been a long-time goalie coach, runs Stop It goaltending in Massachusetts. This guy is
BU as well. He works at BU.
Eats, sleeps, breathes hockey. I remember, you probably remember Evan Hamilton, my goalie partner in UMass Lowell. We actually had to go to Brian Daccord's camp. So it's great to see him, obviously having that bloodline of goaltending and getting Joey there. But I feel like this is much earned for Joey Daccord.
He's had basically one season as an NHL starter, and now next year and the year after, the Kraken are going to have $10.9 million tied up in him and Philip Grubauer. Is that a duo that can get the job done?
I think he is the guy. I just don't see Grubauer's more upside. I think we've seen the best you can get from Grubauer, and nothing against him. I kind of came up in the ranks with Grubauer. I played against him in the East Coast Hockey League, and he is a smaller guy. He kind of does everything right, but at his size, it is tricky to kind of continue, especially when the game gets to the playoff and there's a lot more traffic. And, even watching that Amazon series, you talk about every coach in playoff time, get to the net. You have to make it hard on goalies, and I think that's where Joey Daccord has a little more upside than Philip Grubauer.
Let's talk about the one extension that did not happen. The reports earlier this week, Frank confirmed them yesterday, that Shesterkin turned down a long-term $11 million per year deal with the New York Rangers. Is he insane for not signing that as soon as it came across the desk? Or do you think Shesterkin can get more money?
I think he can get more money, but I still think it is absolutely insane, especially playing with a year to just float, and an injury could happen. There's so many different things that are out of your control as a goalie. So I remember my first contract offer when I went to Buffalo was 2 years. I remember talking to my dad on the phone. He was like, you got to take that deal. I ended up getting Jordan Newman, who Colby knows very well. I ended up getting another year and another about $1 million a year. So it's funny, my perspective from my situation, right? I was always looking for term and as much as I could get, where these younger guys have more confidence, right? And we're seeing it more and more where guys are going to hold teams to the flame and try to get what they can. But for me, this was a deal I can't believe it didn't get done. And I just don't really see what else he can do to play any better than he has, right? I just feel like the other side of this deal is the fact that if he has an off year or an injury, now what happens, right? So, but he's got to play his cards, and we'll see what happens this year. It's going to be interesting.
It's also like New York. You'd think itching to stay there. Like they should be a cup contender as long as he's around. When I saw that number come across, $11 million a year to turn that down is.
And that would mean he's looking for 12.5 or more, because it's only 7 years anywhere else he signs. And now we're getting to a number where even I'm like, I'm not going there with you, buddy. I'm not.
Well,
going
my take on that too is spread out over that 8 years after it's taxed, after you paid your agent, you're living in New York. It's not really that big sum of money. When you talk about 11 million versus 12, yes, it is a lot of money on paper and for the cap, but after it gets spread out, you guys know how the hit works. And so, but yeah, he's betting on himself and he wants to be that huge payday.
He's going to end up in Vegas not paying any income tax when both of their goalies are up after this year. That's my prediction. You heard it here.
I like it.
Carter, you said you guys know how that works. I do not know how taxes for millionaires work. That high? I don't know about you guys, but I digress. The blue paint with Carter Hutton. Thanks for doing this, Carter.
Hey, no problem, guys.
Hashtag AskDFO. Can Carter hook me up with his accountant? Moving along to our daily inbox question, Colby. Again, we're still early in the year. We're still in projection season. So our Ask DFO question today, give me a hot take for an NHL award. Who's someone that you think can maybe come out of the blue a little bit to win one of the big awards at the end of the season?
I think Noah Dobson. I think this is going to be the year of Noah Dobson putting himself as one of the elites. Last year, All-Star Game snub. this year, I think he's going to sit at the top of the mantle for defensemen in the National Hockey League.
You might not call this one a hot take, but he is 9th on the odds boards for this award. UC Saros to win the Vezina.
Never happening.
Never happening.
I don't see it.
He's been top 5 in voting for 3 straight years. He's got a better team in front of him. He's 10-1 right now. No, you're not in on it.
He plays a lot of offense. Andrew Burnett is up the ice. Yossi always up the ice. Doesn't mean they don't defend, but defending is definitely their second thought. That is a team that wants to score goals. They want to play offense. They want to hurt you on the power play. I don't like small goalies. Not personally, no personal beef. I feel better going to sleep at night with a big guy standing between the pipes.
All right. I can't get Colby on board with that. Maybe I can get him on board with one of my 2 daily bets brought to you by Bet365, the largest sports betting platform globally. Check them out online. Download the app and use the promo code DAILY365 to get in on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Solid slate of NHL games tonight, and I am targeting the over between Calgary and Vancouver. Very simple. No Thatcher Demko for Vancouver. Yes, Arthur Seelovs is good, but I'm okay with betting on him not pitching an opening night shutout. Calgary has one of the worst blue lines in the NHL, and they're starting Dan Vladar, who is a good but not great goalie. Also, we saw yesterday there's some sloppy play early in the season, Colby. I know there's a million preseason games, but guys still aren't all that sharp. I like over 6.5 between Calgary and Vancouver, and I'm staying in Western Canada for my second pick. Yes, call me a homer, roll your eyes, but it is a same-game parlay involving the Edmonton Oilers. Money line, McDavid to get both a goal and an assist. Zach Hyman, 3+ shots, comes in at plus 425. So it's juicy, Colb. Do you like either the over or the Oilers to win in their home opener?
I'm going to roll with you on both of these. Like, I think these are winnable bets. Your reasoning in the first one, they're completely reasonable, Tyler. Completely reasonable. You've got 2 kind of unknown products to start a season in net. And then with the Oilers, I mean, look, I'm going to be staying up late a lot this year, Tyler. I'm going to be grumpy about it, so they better entertain me.
That is fair. And if that same gamer hits, it'll be an entertaining night.
Right now, Buckaroo. Jeez. I guess I walked myself into that one, didn't I?
I wasn't going to read it.
It's all right. Bring the heat. Bring the heat.
It's another reason why if you're not in our YouTube chat, you should be. Let's wrap up the show with a little bit of garbage time, Colby. What do you got for me?
So look, there's a massive shift happening in the development of National Hockey League players. And, people that aren't following this whole CHL hockey players being able to play in the NCAA, most likely starting next fall, this is going to create a massive effect on the NHL CBA, on visas, on working permits, on NIL deals. There is so much to this whole CHL being able to become eligible to play in the NCAA. And here's what's going on right now. There was a meeting yesterday, and there's another meeting today with the Division I Council, okay, where they are talking about emergency legislation, which they are going to vote on, okay, in November. It just got pushed to a vote in November. Everybody I've talked to expects this to pass, and these players will be eligible to play in the NCAA at the beginning of next season. What kind of effect that has, I don't know. What if a player gets drafted from the OHL, then he goes to college? How does that work with the CBA? When does it become a free agent? There are so many questions to ask. One final thing I want to say about this. One area that I really do not like or understand is people on this NCAA committee, the voting committee, right? There is no hockey people on this committee. These are athletic directors. These are people from random schools, administrators all over the country. So hockey is really not well represented by the people making these decisions, which I think is a total mistake. Hockey has its own ins and outs. It's why the NHL is trying to push this down the way. Last thing I'll say about it is, if you think about it from this perspective, you can be an amateur golfer, okay, and you can go play in a PGA major if you qualify as an amateur. That means they can pay for your travel and your expenses, but they cannot pay you winning. If you win, you can't accept the $2 million or $3 million bucks. if you want to stay eligible. So why, as a hockey player, can you not go to an NHL training camp as long as you're not being paid? Why can't you go play in a preseason game as long as you're not being paid and then go back and keep your eligibility? I mean, when you look at it from that perspective, or even the players in Europe, it does make sense that this is going to happen. I just hope they're able to get on the same page and get some rules in place that makes this a little bit cohesive. But I think it's going to be a total shit show. Excuse my language.
That's okay. Colby, I love that insight there. And the comparison to golf actually kind of really opened my eyes. That's a really good example in comparison there. There are 5 games on the NHL schedule tonight. Toronto, Montreal, Austin Matthews, first game as the Maple Leafs captain. Sidney Crosby begins his 20th year in the league. The Oilers open up their season against the Jets, Canucks, and Flames, and also another late one tonight with Colorado, Vegas. If you're in the Eastern time zone, it might be a late one for you to catch all of these. If you're like me in the best time zone to watch sports, Mountain time zone, then it's good living. Colby, appreciate you popping on today. We'll be back to break everything down tomorrow with our guy, Frank Saravalli. Enjoy the hockey tonight. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content, from daily live shows with Frank Saravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.